Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm Mark Owen. In Baku, a UN climate conference is underway. The stakes could not be any higher. 2024 is set to be the hottest on record. Damage caused to human life and habitat by the effects of climate change are still being counted, for instance, in Spain, in the wake of deadly floods that claimed over 200 lives. The reconstruction costs in the worst affected areas around Valencia are still being assessed. How long will it take to put things right? At this stage, it's too soon to say. Three major hurricanes have hit the US state of Florida this year: Milton, Debbie, Ellen. The damage caused in the path of the latter became the issue in the US presidential election. But the biggest typhoon so far this year was felt in Southeast Asia, Yagi sweeping away all in its path across China, the Philippines, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, but most of all, Vietnam. Now, with the climate change denier back in the White House, President-elect Trump, of course, the outlook for global warming and its effects worldwide could not be worse. Let's listen to John Podesta. John Podesta is envoy from the outgoing Biden administration to the COP29 in Baku.
While the United States federal government under Donald Trump may put climate action on the back burner, the work to contain climate change is going to continue in the United States with commitment and passion and belief. This is not the end of our fight for a cleaner, safer planet. Facts are still facts. Science is still science. The fight is bigger than one election, one political cycle in one country.
John Podesta stating his case. There's even concern over why Azerbaijan was made the grade rather as host nation, given its record on fossil fuel extraction. We'll maybe talk about that in a few moments. Let's bring in our guests for this very important debate on the climate. Joining us from Brussels is Michael Bloss, who's with the Greens and the European Free Alliance, deputy there at the European Parliament. Michael, thank you for being with us here on the France 24 debate. Joining us by Skype from New York is Gautam Jain, senior research scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy of Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. Thanks for being with us. On set here in the studio, we have Anna Creti, professor at Paris Dauphine, director of the Climate Economics Chair. Thank you for being with us, Anna. Always great to see you. And last but definitely not least is Nicolas Meilon, who is an energy and transport expert, senior advisor at EV Volumes. EV Volumes being electric vehicles. Yeah?
Indeed.
Great to see you, sir.
Mark.
Thank you all for joining us. Can I kind of get the pot boiling here by talking about Trump's election and whether this is such bad news for the climate, as John Podesta is saying? Michael Bloss, can I bring you in first?
Well, absolutely. This is very bad news for climate action. You said it yourself. We have a devastating year. We had floods all over Europe, all over the world. Europe is the fastest warming continent. And in this very moment where we need to step up climate action, a climate change denier gets into the White House, leading the most powerful country on this planet. This is a huge problem, but it also means now others have to step in. The European Union has to become now the global leader on climate action, and unfortunately, they're not doing it right now.
Michael, back to you in a moment. Let's go to New York. Gautam Jain, senior research scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy. Same question, Gautam. Donald Trump, the impact he's going to make. Podesta was talking about the fact that some people in the US clearly are working towards helping the climate.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it is very clear that the first step that President Trump, when he takes office, will be to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Agreement, just like he did last time. This time, he may go a step further, take the U.S. out entirely of the UNFCCC, which is the reason for that is President Biden, when he took office in 2021, he rejoined the Paris Agreement. By taking the U.S. out of the UNFCCC, that becomes still more difficult because to re-enter it, you need the support of 2/3 of the Senate. So it's going to be a big. So yes, definitely, you will see steps taken back. He has pushed against renewable energy policies. He has pushed for increased fossil fuel production. So yes, the policy-wise, that should be the case. In terms of actual action on the ground, I do think states and cities will make up for some of the lack at the federal level in terms of action. And overall, we will still see investments, maybe not at the same pace as they should have happened or would have happened had it been President Harris. But at the same time, we will still see increased investments in the renewable space in the US. The same thing happened in the first term as well. He withdrew from the Clean Power Plan and so on. But the actions still stayed.
I'm sensing pessimism. Gautam, thank you. Michael, thank you. Back to you very shortly. Let's come into the studio where we have Anna Creti from Paris Dauphine University and Nicolas Mailan, who is from EV Volumes. Anna, can I bring you in first? Trump's election, clearly he's got one. He said, drill, drill, drill. He's going to basically start, sort of relaunch the mining of fossil fuels, the pumping out of oil. That's basically his plan, isn't it? He sees that as a way of creating jobs, a way of getting the economy rolling.
Maybe we know that for sure the next generation of political arena in the US is not favorable to climate action. But maybe since we know it, there is a possibility of an upsurge of the other countries. So if we take that for granted, and since there is this uncertainty on the role of the US, we cannot say, we don't have to say that everything is gone. And perhaps this is going to give more room to Europe, which is still leading the action in the regulations against climate change, and maybe foster other coalitions that are going to make also the distraction of the new US Parliament against what they can do to foster action against climate change. So there is still an opportunity. Then the question is how fast it can go. And also, on the other side, the position of Trump, who is in favor of the industry of fossil fuel, has to be a little bit mitigated because it is going to take time. Even if he's giving new licenses, this is not immediate on one side. And on the other, the commitment from the IRA and everything that is going on with renewables, which, by the way, are also a strength in regions or in like Texas, for instance, where there is a lot of jobs, that are new jobs created by renewables, is something that is already there, and it cannot go back. The risk is that it's going to weaken the EPA, so the Environment Protection Agency, and also the National Agency for the Oceans. So, again, this is something that it's going to take time, and for the COP29, he's not there yet.
So Trump has a certain plan. That plan could take time to come into effect, and that might be the thing that sort of perhaps...
Yes, it is a little bit unfortunate that Biden is not going to show up there. So
you would like to see Biden in Azerbaijan?
Yes, yes. So... which is also the case for Macron for other reasons. So there is an intersection as with the political cycle and some diplomatic tensions also. So this is a pity. I would say that more than saying that Trump is not going to be there, the problem is Biden is not there in this moment. It could have been, his last chance to sign something binding for the US.
Indeed, Biden perhaps missing that last chance, Anna's saying there. Anna, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in, last but not least, I'll say that again, Nicolas Mailan, energy and transport expert, senior advisor at EV Volumes. Electric cars is perhaps your specialism, but clearly here, the United States would regard itself as the massive motor producer, all that kind of thing. Things have to change there, don't they? They have to start producing different types of cars.
Yeah, obviously, and it's a bit harder for them because they drive a bit cars which are a bit heavier, so it's a bit harder to electrify. But I just would like to say something and wear my engineer hat on this matter, because if you look at the US as we speak, they are record high oil production. They are at a record high gas production, and it's not Trump who is president; it's under Biden, and that's how we speak as we speak. And I'm part of a group who looks at reserve of oil and gas. And it is likely that the US, as we speak now, are at a maximum of oil production, and a maximum of gas production. So it's likely that in future years, when Trump's getting into office, the production of oil and gas is actually not going to increase, but to decrease.
So Trump might look like he's green by default.
He would like it to increase, but it's maybe not going to happen decrease. Because physically it's not possible. And if we remember when he got into office back in 2016, because there was a big story with Emmanuel Macron, make our planet great again. But according to you, between Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron, who reduced more the CO2 emissions?
Tell us.
Well, there's one which replaced a coal plant running for electricity by gas plants, because replacing coal by gas, and it emits less CO2. And this is how the US has been decreasing their CO2 emission, not from Donald Trump, of course, but since they developed shale gas back in 2010. So, there is what people say, and there is what people do. And honestly, I wouldn't take it for granted that Donald Trump will be able to increase oil and gas production in the US because there is physical constraints.
It's interesting, though, you're saying that Biden has brought it to that sort of high capacity. One doesn't think of that being Biden's stance, but
record level forever in the history of the United States.
All-time record levels. Anna, go ahead.
Only during the Obama mandate there was a decline in oil and gas production. But I think that there was also a scaling up of this production, which was due to the decision taken under Trump, the first mandate, that have been shifted also during the Biden one. But you are right by saying that the production increase has been steady from the 20s. So we don't know whether, unless there is more unconventional oil and gas, which is very costly.
It depends a lot on the price. Yeah. If you have a low price of gas, for example, that's the time being, they have to stop drilling because it's not, they can't make money anymore. So will Donald Trump be able to increase the price of gas? That's the big question. This is going to have the biggest impact.
Let's bring in Michael Blos in Brussels from the Greens, the European Free Alliance. Michael, Donald Trump, first time round, was clearly anti-Europe. There was a sense that there was a real push away for Europe. This was reversed when Joe Biden was elected and said that the USA-Europe relationship is now back on track. Clearly, if Europe and the US aren't working together on this particular issue of emissions or anything to do with green politics and green policy, there is going to be this widening gulf, isn't there, between the two, which isn't going to be good for the planet.
For sure, it's not good for the planet. But what is also not good for the planet is if there is no progress made by the rest of the world. And here we see that basically leaders are missing out Azerbaijan. As you described it, Joe Biden is not going there. Macron is not going there. Olaf Scholz is not going there. Von der Leyen is not going there. That leaves the European Union represented there by Orban and Giorgia Meloni. I think who are a very bad representation of the EU's climate action. Actually gives more of an impression that Europe is also sliding towards Trumpism. Now, Azerbaijan is a terrible country that is basically a fossil autocracy where the leading ruling family uses the income from selling gas and oil to suppress their own people. So, of course, it's debatable whether you should go there or not. But I think in this very moment, when we see that the US is basically lost on the climate action, I think it would have been needed a sign from the European Union that, Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission president, would go there and say, look, the US maybe is out, but the EU is still in. Now there is Viktor Orban representing us. I think that's also very bad news. We need to become global leaders now, and we are not. And it's because Ursula von der Leyen, Scholz, Macron, they all think they have more important problems than the climate. But I think they should devote one day to show that they are now the ones leading on climate action.
Michael, clearly one wouldn't object to the fact that Orban is there in his role as he holds the revolving presidency of the European Union. But nonetheless, I think, Michael, you're saying that he needed someone who basically shared less in common with Donald Trump to be there.
Well, absolutely. I think it's Viktor Orban is doing a lot of things that might or might not be as representing the European Union. But for sure, Viktor Orban is a leader that has been constantly acting against European climate action, against the European Green Deal. So he's not representing us well there. And Baku has to become also a success. They're dealing with the question of global climate finance. And we need to solve this question this year, because next year will be the most important climate conference in Brazil, where it will be about if all parties all together in their climate actions contribute to have global heating reduced to less than or way less than 2 degrees. So we need to come to a solution in Baku on finance in order to come to a solution on the overall climate questions next year in Brazil. And someone has to take the lead in that. And this should be the European Union, but they're not doing this right now, and this is terrible.
This issue of finance is extremely important. Let's bring in Gautam Jain, not particularly on the financing issue, Gautam. I'm not going to push it down on that one, but it is an issue to talk about, isn't it? And clearly, if the next one is going to be in Brazil, and that's very important in terms of what happens to the Amazon rainforest, so many issues there. I recall Donald Trump at one point saying he really admired Jair Bolsonaro, whose great plan was to obviously to turn the Amazon rainforest into farmland. That was his great project. How do we as a planet protect that space? How do we resist people who might want to sort of turn that into fields?
Sure. Before I go into finance, I just wanted to touch upon this point on fossil fuel production from the US, which I completely agree with what Nikolai said earlier, in the sense that the US is right now producing something like 13.5 million barrels of oil per day, which is the highest in the history of any country, not just the US. So as a result, you sort of start seeing limitations on how much it can go up. But there's an additional point. It is one thing to deregulate, which I think President Trump, when he takes office, will do in terms for the fossil fuel industry, and another thing to actually see production going up. If you look at the oil prices and profitability of oil and gas companies over the last 2 years, they have been at record levels. And even though these profits have been at record levels, the capital expenditures haven't really gone up as much as you would have expected. And part of the reason for that is oil prices, or the expectation of oil prices, as Nikolai was hinting at. So these are companies that are looking at potential returns, and they don't look so attractive. So what have they been doing? They have been buying back stock at record pace and paying back dividend to their shareholders, because they don't see as many opportunities to invest. So even if there are more federal lands that are open, and even if there's deregulation, there's a limit to how much you can go from there. So that's on the fossil fuel side. With respect to climate finance, that's exactly right. That this COP has been dubbed as the finance COP. So this is obviously the issue to watch. There will be a new global climate finance target that needs to come out of this COP, called the New Collective Quantified Goal, NCQG. This is just to give you a little bit of a background. This was the last time this target was decided. It was 2009, when developed countries were supposed to mobilize $100 billion a year for climate action in developing countries. The first time this target was met was in 2022. So now we are at the same place again, where a new target needs to be decided. Obviously, everybody understands that the needs, climate needs in emerging markets and developing economies are in trillions of dollars. So obviously the needs are very high. And this quantified goal needs to factor in the needs and priorities, and they agree that's in trillions of dollars. But let's see the amount that's decided and comes out of this. How much more is it relative to the 100 billion target? That's the old target, which expires in 2025. So this is something to watch, not just the target, not just the amount, but which are the countries that contribute to it, and what is the period with which we look at this target again.
One of the problems about this, Gautam, is that the developing countries always point to the fact that the highly modernized countries, let's put it that way, went through a period of burning fossil fuels. You can say it all started in 1790 with the Industrial Revolution kicking off in the UK. They've been through all this dirty stuff. They've polluted the planet, and now, of course, they think, well, we've got the right to develop in some way, shape or form. Does it need some kind of clever operation, and you're hoping for leadership from the likes of Donald Trump to maybe do this, to create some kind of technology exchange that helps these countries to develop in a cleaner way. But there's no sign that that's going to come from the United States, is there?
Yeah, 100%. There needs to be a lot of support, not just technological support. There has to be financial support. You're absolutely right in the sense that the demand for electricity is going to go up multiple times in many parts of emerging and developing economies, especially in Southeast Asia and South Asia. And to the extent that they will meet these needs using, fossil fuels, which is the natural choice that they will make, we can move them away. We can move them more towards renewables if the right investments and technological exchanges happen. There are different efforts that are going on. JET-P is one. There was definitely effort that was started under President Biden. Some of these will take a step back. You're right. In terms of climate finance, there will be a step back. But then, hopefully Europe and other parts of the world try to make up for that gap that is bound to come.
Gautam, you're very clever, because I asked you a question about who's going to save the rainforest and the Amazon. You gave me a whole load of other answers that actually answered the question. It's not as simple as saying this person or that person will do it. Everybody's got to do it, piecing it all together the way you've described. Gautam Jain, thank you, and bear with us. I'll bring in our guests in the studio to, air their thoughts, because they're always welcome. We have Anna Creti from Paris-Dauphine University and Nicola Marland from EV Volumes, Senior Advisor there. Anna, can I bring you in first? This issue of renewables, I think, is really interesting. We have had people speaking to us in the studio here in past programmes regarding renewables in places like Botswana, Kenya, the use of solar panels in places like Morocco, creating lots of electricity, creating opportunities for power. And getting away from, sort of cooking on open fires, those kind of things. It sounds really primitive, but lots of people still do across Africa, which creates pollution, it's bad for your health, all manner of things. How do we get those renewables to go further? How do we get people to have the power, the clean power that they need?
Yeah, there's a double issue in particular in Africa. And I think that during the last two COPs also Africa has tried to talk as a continent, not only as different countries, which is already an improvement in terms of climate diplomacy. However, the first point is to electrify that continent first, which means that we have to increase the uptake of solar panels, but not only, because, we cannot bridge the gap until we reach universal access only by using renewables, even though there is a strong potential. So it means that we have to understand which is the investment planning also in the grid, whether there is also a need to use gas, which is one of the resources that still is present in Africa. Because we, as the old world, we have the means to substitute, or we shouldn't go faster in that, but potentially we can do it. Whereas for those countries, having access by using gas is something that is a necessity. So what they advocate is the way in which they can plan their future by using in a balanced way renewables that are off grids, microgrids, that is installations that are going to be useful especially in the urban areas, but also we need to electrify the faraway parts of the country which need, maybe also gas and other fossil fuels. Which is, as we were saying, not only a question of technological transfer, but also of investment by the companies that are there, which are mainly foreign companies. So the regulation can be shared by also sharing the goals of their sustainable development by creating new flow of investment, which is the problem of global climate finance. On the other side, those countries, including also the movement by the islands, which is with the Philippines being this year very important at the COP29, is the question of adaptation. which is another tier of the global climate finance, as announced in the COP28, in that those countries who also need the access to new energy sources are also quite heavily affected by the impact of climate change. Because if we think about Spain or, I mean, what is going on in Europe, we have to multiply it in terms of drought and extreme events in Africa. So adaptation is also the other tier of global climate finance, not only mitigation. And there's a lot of issue there because there is not a budget that has been agreed last year, and it is something that is going to be negotiated this year.
It's really quite chilling, this idea that finance is so tied to what happens, because I think, you know, we're all led to believe that if we switch the light off and, you know, we brush our teeth and don't run the tap and we make all these kind of efforts, it's going to help. But in fact, that doesn't help very much, does it? You know, what really matters is the investment, the way the money's used, and how smartly that is done. That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, it may seem counterintuitive in that we are talking about the way in which we tackle climate change, and we think that, for instance, something like carbon pricing would be enough to create this incentive and movement towards clean energy. But de facto, it is not enough because there's under the Article 6, there is not yet an agreement on how we are going to use carbon pricing. And it is true that the effort that we can make are part of the story, but only I mean, something that is a small part. And on the other side, we are saying that the role of finance, which is decentralized, that is not only under the cap of the government, but also private actors, is going to give some bigger answers. So it is all this coordination between the role of the states, the role of the diplomacy, the role of Europe, and the instruments, that regulatory instruments. Another issue that is very hot topic is voluntary carbon markets, which is very important for developing countries. This is on one side, and on the other side is what the investors are going to do.
Anna, thank you. Let's bring in Nicola Marlan, because I know you're itching to join the conversation. I can sense it coming from you. Before I let you loose, let me just sort of share with everybody something that our environmental editor, Valerie de Kimp, was saying earlier. We have a great environment team here who make a great programme called Down to Earth. And she came to the studio a little earlier and she told me this great statistic which blew my mind away. So Belgium has more solar panels than the whole of the African continent. So tiny Belgium has more solar panels than the whole of Africa. Now, that kind of gets to the problem, doesn't it, I think? And whether it's about how the money's spent or the technology exchange or the will, I'm not sure. How do you start to get people and companies and governments to see the light?
Yeah, I mean, we tried 10 years ago, you know, with the COP21 in Paris. We committed from 2020 to 2025 to send $100 billion per year from rich country to developing country. And I think we managed to do a tenth of this, so 10.
That kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
And today we're discussing about multiplying this tenfold. So we're talking about 1,000 billion per year. But I have some good news.
Go ahead. We need some good news, sir. Tell us.
So I have some good news. So I've been working for the last year representing France, the French engineers, in an association called Engineer Europe. And we were working specifically on financing. How do we address this problem, which we obviously haven't managed to address over the last 30 years? And we found the solution. And the solution is what? Is first to realize and acknowledge that one of the biggest problems is coal.
Coal.
Electricity from coal is 30% of CO2 emission. And why CO2 emission have been increasing over the last 25 years is because China joined the World Trade Organization by 2001, and we moved all our plants from where we are to China. So what is the solution? The solution is to say we're going to create a coal club. This coal club are the countries which use the most of coals around the world, with a couple of criteria: 50% of electricity coming from coal, 100 terawatt-hour from coal. And what do we do with those countries? We impose a tax on their exports, and this money will be made available for the country who want to decarbonize and to get rid of coal and replace it with nuclear, solar panel, wind turbine, etc.
So I'm thinking that would hit a country like Australia that has a big coal exporting market.
It will impact all countries who use a lot of coal, and it's not only Australia. In my list where people use more than 100 terawatt-hours, there is China, there is India, United States, Japan, Indonesia, Russia. Fortunately, there shouldn't be any European country this year, because that would be a problem to impose some tax on the export as we speak. But you can play with the solution, but I think it's the right way of thinking. So finally, who's going to pay? It's the rich customers, it's the European consumers, because they have to pay an import tax on this. And this money, you make it available in a fund which is managed at the United Nations level, and people can ask for money to get rid of coal by 2050.
So Germany, under Angela Merkel, closed down its nuclear park and obviously fuels its electricity production by gas, by coal, by a number of, I imagine, less clean means.
In Germany, it started actually 25 years ago, because it's an agreement with Schröder and the Greens, 1998, to get rid of nuclear. So they replaced it by renewable, wind, solar, but they also had to get some gas. And that's how they built Nord Stream 1 with Russia and then Nord Stream 2. If they hadn't get rid of nuclear, they wouldn't use any gas in their electricity as we speak. So that's how it's going. But you have to keep in mind that in Germany, they developed also a lot wind turbine and solar. And unfortunately, with the industry collapse they're going through, that is the good news with that, is that the coal consumption is also falling down. So that's the good news of the bad news.
Let me pause you and bring in Michael Bloss, who I understand has to leave us soon. A Green deputy at the European Parliament. Michael, over to you. Clearly, Germany, a subject you can talk about. Tell us about the situation there.
Yeah, and we moved a little bit away from the original debate, but the success story, I think, is clear. This year, we only built solar in Germany with the electricity production capacity of around 13 gigawatts, so let's say around 13 small nuclear power plants. I think it's a huge success story that we are moving really to renewables, to a fully renewable system that assures us that electricity prices will be low because the sun and the wind are not charging anything, whereas most of the uranium in Europe is still coming from Russia, and we are still giving Russia money for gas, oil, and for uranium, which they use to bomb Ukraine. So I think that's perfectly a good solution. I think the coal club, we are moving away from coal right now, is an interesting, but the problem is it only has a stick, and the question is, where is the carrot? And I think in international negotiations, you cannot just say, okay, we are just penalizing a lot of countries, but you need to work together with them. But I think there could be also some carrots, for instance, renewable energy technology from Europe, which is, I think, very great. In essence, still to go back to what should be happening in Baku, and we discussed finance. I think we had the hearings of the EU climate commissioner last week. I'm in the delegation from the European Parliament to the climate conference in Baku. And it seems to me that Europe did not at all prepare. They did not have consultations with its finance ministers. How are we going to act on these finance questions? And just my last appeal is, in 2 weeks, the climate conference ends. We have time until then to come up with a European solution to this financial question. And I think von der Leyen, for Hoekstra, they all should step in now to find a solution, because Europe needs to become the leader now. I said it before, and in Baku we can show it, and this seems to happen right now, no one cares anymore. But no one cares means that we just experienced a small amount of what a 2-degree hotter Earth will look like this year in Europe. And it means we are actually heading towards a climate catastrophe that probably human civilization will not be able to cope with. So we should get really our act together, and now it's the time for Europe to work.
Final word from you, Mikhail, before you run off. You're off to Baku to take part in COP29. I'm wondering how you feel about Azerbaijan being chosen as a venue, as a host nation. Just to sort of give people a context, the US State Department accuses Azerbaijan of a wide variety of human rights abuses, including unlawful or arbitrary killing, heavy restrictions on free expression, the press, the internet, and the worst forms of child labour.
No, it is terrible there for its citizens. We are going there with burner phones that we throw away afterwards because we know that the Azerbaijani state will spy on us. There is a lot of people that actually spoke out that are now in custody, like maybe Dr. Gubat Ibadoglu, who has a heart failure and is not allowed to go for a heart surgery. So, yeah, we go to a country that basically says they want to even increase their gas drilling, so drill, baby, drill, and they are put in charge of solving the climate crisis. This is completely absurd. We must not go to fossil autocracies anymore and give them basically the presidency for climate talks, because basically it's not in their interest. So this is another problem that we have to solve, that the presidency, who is, negotiating, putting the compromises forward, they basically have zero interest that this will be a success.
Mikhail Bloss, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us in the France 24 debate. We appreciate your time. Let's bring it back in from New York, Gautam Jain of the Global Energy Policy Group, senior research scholar at that Centre on Global Energy Policy. Gautam, is that one of the issues, this concept that, or this idea rather, or rather proof, because it has been exposed, that there are discussions going on involving certain states trying to cut some kind of deal so they continue what they're doing, i.e. continue to produce dirty fuels?
Yeah, I'm not sure I necessarily look at it that way, in the sense that, to me, most of the, as we were discussing earlier on fossil fuel, a lot of it comes down to the demand side, in the sense that, the supply is one thing you can control, but the demand is the one that's kind of driving the action of oil and gas companies. So to the extent that we see demand peaking in the future, and this peak could come with more EVs on the ground, with other renewables taking over, and as a result of that, you will see a lot of these companies, whether they're in IOCs or NOCs, they will adjust their action accordingly, because ultimately they want to generate a profit. So to me, the demand side is the one that we need to work to bring down. And that's the part that to me is more critical.
The demand side, does that mean the consumer? Does that mean business? Does that mean governments? Can you be a bit more precise on that for me, please?
So all of it, in the sense that there's a role for all of it, in the sense that government can provide incentives, whether the incentives come in the form of IRA tax credits for consumers or homeowners, for example, to move towards having more solar rooftops, for businesses to use, for utilities, for example, to have more solar and onshore wind. So there's a role for government, there's a role for businesses to invest in these technologies, especially as they have become more cost effective. There is no excuse now. In the past, there would be more investment. That's not necessarily the case. And in fact, that is the positive that you can take, that despite President Trump's reelection, that these actions will happen, because people will move towards solutions that are most cost effective and most profitable for companies. So I think it's a combination of all these that you mentioned. All of them have a role to play.
If it would help that people had solar panels on their roofs, why aren't governments paying for this to happen? That's what I'm left wondering. It would be, surely that would help if every house had solar panels.
Yes, 100%. So I think that's why the IRA tax credits are important. That similar things are happening in other countries where they're providing credits for these panels, and solar panels alone won't do. There's efforts also towards energy efficiency. That, again, those are part of IRA. By the way, in terms of IRA, that's another thing that's, obviously the assumption is that President Trump, when he comes in, will try to repeal. But even if he gets the trifecta, which is essentially control of both houses, it's highly unlikely that he repeals it in its entirety. Very likely he will tweak some things, take some things out that he's not in favor of. For example, providing tax credit for EVs or a methane charge on oil and gas companies. He'll take some things out. But for for the most part, it will probably stay in place because, as I think Anna mentioned earlier, that a lot of benefits are flowing into Republican districts. 80% of the investments are happening there. So that is definitely a positive. The other positive is, by the way, there's bilateral agreement, bipartisan agreement on nuclear energy. That is something that he may push for. And as he pushes for, at least we'll get another source of more investments and another source of low emission technologies.
Thank you very much indeed, Gautam Jain from New York, the Global Energy Policy Group. You mentioned the trifecta. That's Trump, the president, Republicans controlling the Congress, that's the Senate and the House. And then underneath that, the Supreme Court has an inbuilt Republican majority. So, effectively, Trump can do whatever he wants with the US climate policy, can't he?
We're going to see. I think that there are a lot of economic interests at stake. There are also the federal banks that are quite active in forcing towards green finance. There's not a unique, I would say, landscape. It is the case for the US, but it's also the case for other countries. And we all have contradictions in this story. There's no unanimity of the solutions, and I think that this is one of the questions that we have. And regarding the fact that, yes, it is unfortunate that all these questions about cooperation are going to be discussed in a country that is not cooperative, but we didn't have such a chance during the last 2 years. But, there are some movements. For instance, the first country that has presented the revision of the national determined contribution is Saudi Arabia. That would be the one of Brazil. That is the next country where the COP is going to be. The UK is going also to present the revision of their commitments. There are some signals that other countries are going to set some standards in the way in which we should proceed. The problem is always the same, how fast we can go and how fast climate change is affecting us.
Anna, thank you very much indeed. Final comment from Nicola. Keep it brief, please, sir.
Very brief. Yeah, I think there is an elephant in the room when we talked about climate change, and it's China, which is 50% of coal globally. So as long as we don't help China in a way or another to reduce their coal consumption, there's nothing to expect. And guess what? Who would be the next politician to put some tax on China? I'm not sure it's Europe.
Nicola Marland, energy transport expert, senior advisor, EV Volumes. Thank you very much indeed. Anna Creti, professor at Paris Dauphine University and director of the Climate Economics Chair. Thank you very much indeed, as always. Thanks to Michael Bloss, who joined us from Brussels. And thank you to Gautam Jain, senior research scholar at the Centre on Global Energy Policy, joining us from New York. Thanks to you all for watching wherever you are across the world. Do stay with us. More to come here on France 24.